The cowboy only wanted bread, until her kindness to his child turned into a life-changing proposal. The sun was just beginning to rise over the dusty horizon, painting the small frontier town with soft orange and gold light. The streets were quiet except for the occasional clatter of a horse's hooves against the wooden planks of the boardwalk. A gentle wind carried the smell of fresh bread from the bakery at the corner, mixing with the earthy scent of hay and horses from the nearby stables. Into this peaceful morning rode a cowboy, his horse's hooves kicking up small clouds of dust with every step. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a worn hat pulled low over his eyes, hiding most of his face. His clothes were simple and rugged, clearly patched in places from long months of travel. On his back was a small bundle, carefully tied with a frayed rope. Inside, nestled safely, was a young child with wide, curious eyes that peeked out from under a small blanket. The cowboy was quiet, his eyes scanning the street as if expecting trouble at any corner. He was not a man who trusted easily, and years of wandering alone had taught him that kindness was rare and often came with strings attached. He wasn't here to make friends. He wasn't here to talk to anyone. He was here for one thing and one thing only, a loaf of bread. His stomach grumbled quietly under his worn coat, reminding him that it had been too long since a proper meal. As they reached the town, the sounds of morning life began to grow louder. Doors creaked open, and shopkeepers stepped out, sweeping the dust from their doorways. Children ran by, laughing and chasing one another, their energy as bright and fleeting as sunlight on the water. The cowboy's daughter stirred in his arms, her tiny hands curling around his finger as she watched the world with fascination. "Almost there, little one," he murmured, his voice low and rough from months of dry air and hard work. He didn't need to explain much. The child understood that he would always provide, no matter what. She smiled faintly, her small hand patting his arm, as if she could sense his worry and wanted to offer comfort in return. The bakery came into view, its windows fogged slightly from the warmth of ovens inside. The smell of fresh bread was stronger here than anywhere else in town. It was the kind of smell that could make a person forget the worries of the road, even if only for a moment. The cowboy's stomach gave another sharp growl, and he tightened his grip on the reins. He dismounted carefully, lowering his daughter to the ground. She took a few unsteady steps toward the bakery, her little boots clicking softly against the wooden planks. The cowboy watched her closely, his eyes flicking to the people around him. There were a few early customers already inside, chatting quietly with the baker, who moved with practiced ease, pulling fresh loaves from the oven and placing them in baskets. The cowboy stepped inside, his boots echoing slightly on the floor. He kept his head down, scanning the bread, counting coins carefully in his hand. He had enough for only one loaf, but that was all they needed. He didn't want to draw attention to himself, didn't want anyone to ask questions. He simply wanted bread for his daughter and himself so that they could eat and move on, as they had so many mornings before. As he reached the counter, he noticed a woman kneeling near the doorway. Her attention focused on a small child who had wandered too close to the edge of the street. She was softly laughing, her hair falling gently around her face, her eyes kind and bright. The cowboy glanced at her quickly and looked away, unsure why his heart had given a small, unexpected flutter. He had spent so many years alone. He had almost forgotten how it felt to notice someone with curiosity instead of suspicion. His daughter, too curious to wait, had already toddled toward the woman, her small hand waving as she called out softly. The woman's face lit up with a warm smile as she bent down to greet the child. She handed the little girl a piece of bread from a small basket she was carrying, and the child's eyes widened with delight. The cowboy's eyes narrowed slightly, not with anger but with caution. He had seen enough people in towns like this to know that not everyone offered help without expecting something in return. He stepped closer, keeping one hand lightly on his daughter's shoulder. "Thank you, ma'am," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of long nights on the trail. He kept his tone polite but distant, not wanting to linger in conversation. The woman simply nodded, her smile remaining gentle. "You're welcome, little one," she said softly, patting the child's hair. "Be careful out here." The cowboy nodded again and turned toward the counter. He handed over his coins for the loaf of bread, careful to count each one. The baker looked him over, noticing the small child at his side but said nothing, simply placing the warm loaf into a paper bag. With bread in hand, the cowboy moved toward the door, keeping his daughter close. The woman watched them go, her smile lingering as if she could feel the loneliness that clung to the man like a shadow. The cowboy didn't look back. He never looked back. But for the first time in a long while, he felt something stir inside him, something soft and unfamiliar. A tiny spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, not every stranger in the world was a threat. Outside, the sun had climbed higher, and the town was fully awake now, bustling with merchants, children, and travelers. The cowboy mounted his horse carefully, the child settling back into the saddle behind him. He held the loaf of bread securely in one hand, his eyes scanning the horizon once more before setting off down the dusty road that led out of town. As they rode, the little girl clutched her bread and smiled up at her father. "Can we eat it now, Papa?" she asked, her voice full of simple excitement. "Soon, little one," he replied, a small, rare smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Soon. Though he tried to focus on the road ahead, his mind kept returning to the woman in the bakery. There was something about her kindness, the way she had looked at his child without fear or judgment, that unsettled him in a way he hadn't expected. For years, he had believed the world was harsh and unkind, that trust could be costly and mistakes even more so. Yet now he felt the strange, unfamiliar urge to hope that there were still good people, still safe places, still moments of simple joy. The wind brushed past him as they rode further from the town, carrying with it the faint scent of the bakery, the warm aroma of bread lingering in his senses. He let out a quiet sigh, not sure if it was relief, gratitude, or something else entirely. The little girl leaned against him, her small hand holding his, and he felt a protective warmth rise in his chest. But now the road ahead was long, and their journey far from over. But for the first time in many months, the cowboy allowed himself a small thought. Maybe, just maybe, life could hold something more than hunger and hardship. Maybe in some small way, kindness could change everything. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the horizon, spreading soft light across the small town. Birds chirped from the wooden rooftops, and a gentle breeze carried the faint scent of dew and grass. The cowboy and his daughter had returned to the edge of town, following the dusty path that led to the bakery. It was early, but the little girl's curiosity was too strong to wait. She wanted to see the friendly woman again, the one who had given her bread the day before. The cowboy rode slowly, keeping a careful eye on the streets. His daughter sat behind him, leaning slightly against his back, her small hands wrapped around his waist. Her eyes sparkled with excitement as she peeked over his shoulder, scanning the town for any sign of the kind woman. She could barely contain her happiness. The thought of another warm smile, another gentle word, made her forget the rough life she had known on the trail. When they reached the bakery, the doors were just opening. The woman was arranging fresh loaves of bread on the shelves, humming softly to herself. She looked up and smiled as she noticed the little girl waving enthusiastically. The cowboy felt a small, unfamiliar warmth in his chest, but he kept his face neutral, as he always did. He had learned long ago not to show too much feeling in public. The woman knelt down again and waved gently to the child. "Good morning, little one. Did you sleep well?" she asked kindly, her voice soft and inviting. The child ran toward her, her tiny boots tapping against the wooden floor. "Yes." "And can I have some bread?" she asked eagerly, her eyes shining with hope. The woman laughed lightly, a sound that felt like sunshine breaking through clouds. "Of course you can," she said, handing the girl a warm piece of bread from the basket she carried. The child's face lit up with joy as she accepted it, and she turned to show her father. The cowboy stayed back, leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed. He watched quietly, his mind turning over memories of his own childhood. It had been a lonely life, filled with hard work and few smiles. He had learned to rely only on himself, to protect those he loved without asking for help. But seeing his daughter's happiness stirred something deep inside him, a sense of gratitude and wonder he had not felt in many years. The woman looked up at him, her eyes warm in understanding. "You have a sweet little girl," she said gently. "She seems very brave," the cowboy nodded slightly, keeping his voice steady. "She is. She's my world." "I can see that," the woman replied, smiling softly. "It's rare to see such care and love. You must be very proud." He didn't answer immediately, not because he disagreed, but because words had always been a stranger to him. He was not used to compliments, and they made him uncomfortable. Yet, there was something about the woman's kindness that made him want to listen, to share, even if only a little. The little girl finished her bread quickly, crumbs spilling onto the floor. She looked up at her father with wide eyes. "Can we come here every morning?" she asked, her voice filled with hope. The cowboy hesitated, then nodded. "If you want," he said softly. He didn't know why, but he wanted to make her happy. He wanted her to feel safe and loved, even if only for a few hours in a day. Over the next few days, the visits became a routine. The woman always had a warm smile and a small piece of bread for the child. She would kneel down to talk to her, asking about her day and listening patiently to her small, excited stories. The little girl began to laugh more freely, her laughter filling the bakery and touching the hearts of everyone who heard it. The cowboy remained quiet, observing from a distance, but he began to notice changes in himself. He found himself looking forward to these visits, to seeing the warmth in the woman's eyes and the happiness on his daughter's face. He began to trust her, not entirely, but enough to feel relief in her presence. He realized that not everyone in the world was harsh or cruel. There were people willing to care without expecting anything in return. One afternoon, as the sun hung low in the sky, painting the town in golden light, a small accident occurred. The little girl, excited by the new pastries on display, reached up and accidentally knocked a basket of rolls to the floor. They tumbled across the wooden boards, rolling under tables and chairs. "Oh, no!" she cried, looking frightened. The woman quickly bent down, gathering the scattered rolls. "It's all right, sweet one," she said gently, her voice calm and reassuring. "No harm done." The cowboy's eyes narrowed slightly, a protective instinct rising. He stepped closer, ready to scold or defend, but the woman looked up at him calmly and smiled. "I've got it," she said. "She's fine. Don't worry." He studied her for a moment, surprised by her composure. Most people would have scolded the child or turned away in irritation, but she didn't. She simply helped, quietly and kindly. For the first time, the cowboy felt that he could trust someone outside of himself, someone who genuinely cared about his daughter. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between the woman and the little girl grew stronger. They would play quietly in the corner of the bakery, drawing pictures with chalk on small boards the woman kept for them. The child would tell stories of their travels, and the woman would listen attentively, asking questions and encouraging her imagination. The cowboy began to participate, though cautiously. He would help her draw simple shapes or letters, and the little girl would clap her hands in delight. Each small moment was a step toward connection, toward a life that could be brighter than the lonely existence they had known. One rainy afternoon, the cowboy found himself staying longer than usual in the bakery. The streets outside were slick with rain, and the horse waited patiently at the edge of town. He sipped a small cup of warm tea, keeping his eyes on the child as she laughed with the woman over a story. He realized that he had not felt this comfortable in the presence of another adult in years. "You have a good heart," the woman said softly, noticing his gaze. He looked up, startled. I don't know what you mean," he said, unsure how to respond. "You care deeply for your daughter," she said. "It shows in everything you do, even if you don't say it aloud. She feels it, and I see it too." He nodded slowly, not trusting his voice to carry the words he might have wanted to say. It was true. Everything he did, every decision, every step of the long journey had been for her. And to have someone recognize that quietly, without judgment or expectation, touched him in a way he had long forgotten. As the rain pattered softly against the windows, the little girl climbed into his lap, her small arms wrapped around his neck. "Can we stay a little longer, Papa?" she asked. He held her close, feeling the warmth of her tiny body against his. "Yes," he said softly. "We can stay." Outside, the town continued its daily rhythm, but inside the bakery, time seemed to slow. There was only the sound of laughter, the soft tapping of rain, and the quiet moments of connection that slowly began to stitch their lives together. By the time they left, the sun had broken through the clouds, casting warm light across the wet streets. The cowboy mounted his horse, the little girl settled behind him, and he looked back once more at the bakery. The woman waved, her smile bright and sincere, and he felt an unfamiliar sensation in his chest. Gratitude, perhaps, or the beginnings of hope. As they rode away, he realized that this small town, this simple act of kindness, had begun to change something in him. He had come seeking only bread, only sustenance for his daughter and himself. Yet, in her simple gestures of care, he had found a warmth that nourished far more than hunger. It nourished the heart, the soul, and perhaps, in time, something even deeper. And though he did not yet know it, this was only the beginning. The bond that had started with a piece of bread would grow stronger, shaping not only his daughter's life but his own. For the first time in many years, the cowboy allowed himself to believe that kindness could change everything. Days turned into weeks, and the cowboy found himself returning to the town more often than he had expected. Each morning he would ride slowly into the dusty streets, the little girl clinging behind him, her eyes bright with excitement at the thought of seeing the kind woman again. The routine had grown into something comforting, a small rhythm in the unpredictable life they led on the trail. The woman at the bakery had become a constant presence in their lives. She greeted the little girl warmly, always offering a fresh piece of bread and a kind word. She would ask about the child's day, her stories, her small adventures, and listen as if every word mattered. And indeed they did matter, both to the little girl and, quietly, to the cowboy. He watched these interactions from the doorway at first, still cautious, still unsure of how much of himself he could allow to be seen. But slowly, walls began to crumble. One morning the woman noticed the cowboy lingering longer than usual at the door. "Would you like some tea?" she asked softly, nodding toward the small table set by the window. He hesitated, unused to being offered kindness for himself, but the look in her eyes was patient, without pressure. He nodded once and stepped inside. The warmth of the bakery wrapped around him like a soft blanket, the scent of bread and sugar comforting in a way he had not realized he had missed. The little girl ran ahead, chattering excitedly about the story she had drawn with chalk the day before. The woman laughed, her voice like music, and the cowboy found himself smiling quietly at the sight. He hadn't expected to feel this sense of calm in a town he had once considered just a stop on the road. As he sipped the warm tea, the woman asked softly, "You travel a lot, don't you? You're not from around here, are you?" He shook his head slowly. "No," he said, his voice low.
"We move from place to place. It's
safer that way." "I can imagine," she replied gently. "But it must be hard, too, for you and for her." He gestured toward the little girl who was now laughing over a small pile of breadcrumbs she had arranged like little patterns on the table. He looked at her and then away, unsure if he wanted to admit the truth. "It is," he said finally. "But we manage. Always have." "You manage," she repeated, smiling softly. "But you don't have to do it alone. You know that, don't you?" The words felt strange in his ears. No one had ever offered him help so gently, without judgment, without expectation. He had spent years relying on only himself, and the thought of accepting assistance felt foreign and almost wrong. Yet there was a warmth in her tone, a sincerity that made him want to listen, want to trust. Days passed, and their meetings became longer and more relaxed. The little girl would play with simple toys the woman kept in the corner of the bakery, while the cowboy quietly watched, sometimes joining in small ways. He would help her stack blocks, teach her to draw simple shapes, or quietly show her how to count. Each small interaction felt like a stitch, slowly mending a part of his heart he had long forgotten existed. One afternoon, as the sun poured golden light through the windows, the woman brought out a small wooden box. "I thought your daughter might like this," she said, handing it to her. Inside were small wooden figurines, horses, cows and little people. The child's eyes lit up and she hugged the woman tightly. The cowboy felt a strange sensation in his chest, a mix of gratitude and something deeper, something he had not felt in years. He realized that this simple act, giving a child a toy, offering kindness without expectation, had begun to change him. It had begun to open a door to trust, to hope, and perhaps even to the possibility of happiness beyond survival. Their bond continued to grow, and the little girl began to talk more openly about her life on the road. She shared stories of campfires, of sunsets over wide plains, and of small towns they had passed through. The woman listened, laughing, asking questions, and encouraging her imagination. And the cowboy, though quieter, began to join in these stories, offering small details, letting her see a side of him rarely shared with anyone. One day a problem arose in town that tested the cowboy's patience and his trust. A strong windstorm swept through, toppling small signs and scattering debris across the streets. The little girl, curious and unaware of danger, ran toward a rolling piece of wood that had fallen near the road. The cowboy moved quickly, scooping her up just as she reached it. The woman was at his side instantly, helping him steady the child. "Are you both all right?" she asked, her voice calm but concerned. "We are," he replied, holding his daughter close. "Thank you for being here." She smiled gently. "Of course. That's what friends do." Ha 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 ha. The word friend struck him unexpectedly. He had spent so long alone that he had almost forgotten what friendship meant. Yet hearing it now, spoken without judgment or obligation, made him wonder if life could be different, if it could be better. As the storm cleared, the three of them walked slowly back to the bakery, the child chattering about the excitement of the wind, and the woman smiling warmly.
The cowboy followed quietly, feeling a growing sense of connection he could not ignore.
Evenings began to take on a new meaning for the cowboy. After their visits to the bakery, they would camp just outside the town, letting the little girl sleep peacefully while he prepared a small meal. And sometimes in the quiet moments after the day's activity he would think about the woman, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, the gentle patience in her voice, the way she had never judged him for being quiet or wary. He realized slowly that the simple acts of kindness had begun to change more than just his daughter's world. They were changing him, too. He found himself looking forward to each morning, each walk into town, each laugh that echoed from the bakery. For the first time in a long time, he felt that life could be more than just survival. It could be full of warmth, connection, and hope. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, painting the town in hues of orange and pink, the woman invited the cowboy to help her with something special. She handed him a small basket of freshly baked bread and asked him to deliver it to some of the town's elderly residents who could not come to the bakery. The cowboy was hesitant at first, unsure if he wanted to interact with so many people, but he agreed, realizing that this small act could teach his daughter the importance of kindness and generosity. As he walked through the town, delivering bread and sharing smiles, he felt a strange sense of pride. People greeted him warmly, and the little girl followed closely, handing out bread and waving shyly. By the time they returned to the bakery, the sun had almost set. The cowboy looked at the woman, realizing that he had been changed by her simple acts of care. He had come seeking only bread for his daughter and himself, but he had found something far more important: connection, trust, and the quiet possibility of a better life. That evening, as they rode back to camp, the little girl leaned against him, exhausted. "I love her, Papa," she whispered softly. He smiled, brushing her hair gently. "I know," he replied, "and she cares for you too." That's a good thing to have in the world. For the first time in many years, the cowboy allowed himself to imagine a life beyond the trail, a life where kindness and love could flourish. The small woman in the bakery had not just given bread, she had given him hope. And slowly, steadily, that hope began to grow into something more, a possibility that their lonely lives could become full, rich, and meaningful. And though he did not yet know it, this was only the beginning. The bond between the woman, the little girl, and the cowboy would deepen, guiding them toward challenges, joys, and a life that none of them could have imagined when the first loaf of bread had been shared so simply and kindly. The days were growing longer, and the town began to bustle with the energy of late spring. The cowboy and his daughter continued their visits to the bakery, and their bond with the kind woman grew stronger with each passing day. The little girl had begun to feel at home in the small town, her laughter echoing through the bakery and the streets as she played or helped with small chores. The cowboy, though quieter, had become a familiar figure in the town as well. People began to recognize him, not just as a stranger passing through, but as a devoted father, careful and gentle with his child. He still maintained a distance, wary of forming attachments too quickly, yet something deep within him was shifting. The warmth he had felt in the bakery, in the simple acts of kindness shared by the woman, had begun to take root. One afternoon, as the sun rose high in the sky, the cowboy noticed a commotion near the edge of the town. A wagon had overturned on the uneven road, spilling goods across the dirt and drawing the attention of townspeople. The little girl watched from the bakery doorway, curious and concerned, while the woman stepped forward to help. The cowboy moved quickly, instinctively, his protective instincts heightened. He approached the scene and saw that the driver was struggling to right the heavy wagon, while children and animals nearby were frightened. Without hesitation, he stepped in to assist, lifting one end of the wagon with practiced strength while the driver steadied the other. His daughter watched in awe, and the woman's eyes followed him, admiration and concern mingling in her gaze. "Are you all right?" the woman called out, her voice calm, but urgent. "I'm fine," he replied, focusing on the task at hand. "Keep your daughter back." The little girl clutched her mother's hand, her eyes wide as she watched the cowboy work. He had always been strong, but seeing him move with purpose to help others stirred a sense of pride and reassurance in her. She knew, as she always had, that her father was capable of protecting them. Yet seeing him offer strength to strangers as well filled her heart with wonder. When the wagon was finally upright and secured, the cowboy wiped sweat from his brow, feeling the strain in his muscles. He turned to the woman and nodded. "All set," he said quietly. She smiled, her eyes softening.
Thank you.
"You didn't have to help, but you did. That says a lot about who you are." He looked down, unaccustomed to praise, and simply nodded. Words were often unnecessary for him. His actions spoke for themselves, yet her recognition, her quiet understanding, stirred something within him that had long been dormant, hope that perhaps life could be more than just survival. The next few days brought an unexpected challenge. A sudden illness swept through the town, affecting many of the residents, including the elderly and children. The bakery remained open, but the woman found herself overwhelmed with requests for bread, warm meals, and small comforts for those who were unwell. The little girl watched her, concerned. The cowboy, seeing her struggle, quietly offered to help. At first, she protested, saying it was too much for him. But he insisted, and together, they delivered bread and supplies to those who could not leave their homes. He carried the heavier loads, navigated the rough paths, and ensured that the little girl remained safe and out of harm's way. During this time, the cowboy observed the woman closely. He saw her kindness not as something extraordinary, but as a natural extension of who she was. She treated every resident with patience and care, offering comfort without expecting anything in return. Her actions, simple as they were, revealed a depth of compassion and courage that left a lasting impression on him. One evening, as the town slowly returned to normal, the woman invited the cowboy and his daughter to sit with her at the bakery after her work was done. They shared a quiet meal, the warm light of the lamps casting soft shadows across the room. The little girl played nearby, content and happy, while the cowboy finally allowed himself to relax.
"You did well today," the woman said quietly, her gaze meeting his.
"You helped so many people. They will remember it." "I just did what I could," he replied, his voice low. "I couldn't let them struggle." "Not when I could help." Her eyes softened. "That's what makes you remarkable. You care for those around you, not just for yourself or your daughter. It's a rare thing." He looked away, unsure how to respond. Praise and kindness were still new to him, but he felt a growing sense of warmth in her presence. For the first time in years, he considered the possibility that someone could see him, not just the rough exterior, but the heart beneath it, and care. The little girl, sensing the mood, climbed onto his lap and hugged him tightly. "I love helping people, Papa," she said softly. "And I'm proud of you," he replied, holding her close. "Helping others is important. It makes the world better." The woman watched them, a quiet smile on her face. She had seen the transformation in the cowboy, how small acts of care and connection had begun to open his heart, and she knew that the bond they were forming could grow into something deeper, something lasting. As the evening turned to night, a sudden knock came at the bakery door. A messenger from the town's council had arrived with urgent news. A neighboring farm had been damaged in a storm, and the family there needed immediate help to save their crops and livestock. The cowboy exchanged a glance with the woman, understanding instantly what was required. Without hesitation, he agreed to go. The woman quickly packed provisions, bread, and supplies, and the little girl insisted on coming along, though she was instructed to stay close to the bakery's edge for safety. The journey to the farm was difficult, with uneven paths and lingering mud from the recent rain, but the cowboy navigated it with skill, ensuring that both his daughter and the supplies arrived safely. Upon reaching the farm, the cowboy immediately began helping. He repaired fences, moved heavy supplies, and guided the family in salvaging what they could. The woman worked alongside him, her hands steady and capable, offering encouragement and practical assistance. Together they worked tirelessly until the sun began to set, the sky painted with warm hues of orange and pink. During a brief pause, the cowboy watched the woman carefully. He realized that her presence had become indispensable, not just to his daughter and the town, but to him. She had shown him courage, patience, and kindness in ways he had never experienced before, and in that moment he felt a deep unspoken bond forming between them, one that was built not on words alone, but on shared actions and trust. The little girl ran up to them, her small hands clapping with delight at the progress they had made. "We saved it!" she exclaimed. "Yes, we did," the cowboy said, smiling, a rare warmth in his eyes. "Because we worked together." The woman nodded, her gaze meeting his. "You have a good heart," she said softly, "and you're raising a daughter to have the same. That matters more than anything else." As they prepared to return to town, the cowboy felt a new sense of purpose. For years, he had traveled alone, surviving each day without expecting joy or connection. But now he had witnessed the power of kindness, the strength of working together, and the warmth that could come from trusting another person. He knew, without fully understanding how, that his life and his daughter's life would never be the same. The woman had not only helped them navigate challenges, but she had opened the door to a future where happiness, care, and love were possible. The journey back to the bakery was quiet, the little girl asleep behind him, exhausted from the day's adventure. The cowboy rode slowly, his mind turning over the events that had unfolded. He had come seeking only to survive, only to provide for his child. But he had found something far more valuable. A glimpse of a life where hearts could be opened, where trust could flourish, and where kindness could lead to lasting change. That night, as he watched his daughter sleep under the stars by their small camp, he realized that the woman had given him more than bread, more than companionship. She had given him hope, hope that life could be brighter, fuller, and warmer than he had ever dared to imagine. And for the first time in many years, he allowed himself to believe that one day he could offer more than survival to his daughter. He could offer a home, friendship, and perhaps even love. The seed of change had been planted, and he felt it grow quietly in his heart, ready to blossom in the days to come. The next morning the cowboy awoke to the soft glow of sunlight streaming over the horizon. The air was crisp and fresh, carrying the gentle scent of dew and the faint aroma of bread from the nearby bakery. For the first time in many weeks, he felt a quiet peace settle over him. The events of the past days, the storm, the illness in town, helping the neighbors, and the warmth of the woman's kindness, had shifted something deep within him. He realized that life could hold more than mere survival. It could hold hope, love, and family. The little girl stirred in her small blanket, rubbing her eyes as she looked up at him. "Papa," she whispered softly. "Yes, little one," he replied. brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "Can we go to the bakery today?" she asked eagerly. "I want to see her." The cowboy smiled faintly. Her excitement was contagious, and he felt a deep warmth at the thought of seeing the woman who had brought so much light into their lives. "Yes," he said. "Let's go." When they reached the bakery, the woman was already outside, arranging fresh bread in baskets near the doorway. She looked up and smiled warmly as they approached. Her eyes sparkled with genuine delight, and the little girl ran toward her without hesitation. "Good morning," the woman said cheerfully. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes," the little girl exclaimed, hugging her gently. "And I have something to show you." She pulled a small wooden figurine from her pocket, the horse she had saved from the overturned wagon days ago. Look, I took care of him, just like you showed me." The woman knelt down, her eyes shining with pride. "You've done a wonderful job. I'm so proud of you." The cowboy watched quietly, a small smile tugging at his lips. It was moments like these, simple, sincere moments, that made him feel a depth of connection he had never experienced before. The woman's kindness had nurtured something in both his daughter and himself, and he knew that their lives would never be the same. As they sat together sharing bread and warm tea, the conversation turned toward the future. The little girl chatted excitedly about new stories, and the woman listened attentively, laughing and encouraging her imagination. The cowboy found himself speaking more freely than he had in years, sharing small details about their travels, their challenges, and the joys they had discovered along the way. After a while, the woman glanced at him, her expression gentle and curious. "You've changed so much since the first time you came here," she said softly. "I can see the love you have for your daughter, but also the way your heart has begun to open." He looked down at his hands, feeling a slight flush in his cheeks. I suppose I have," he admitted quietly. "It's not easy to trust others, not after so many years alone. But you've shown me that kindness can change everything, and not just for her, for me too." Her smile deepened. "That's all I ever hoped for. That someone would see the goodness in you, and that you would let it grow." The little girl, sensing the seriousness in their conversation, climbed onto her father's lap. "Papa," she asked softly, "do you think she'll always be our friend?" He hugged her close, feeling the warmth of her small body against his. "Yes," he said firmly. "She will always be our friend. And maybe something even more than that." The words hung in the air, and the woman's eyes widened slightly, though she quickly covered it with a soft smile. The cowboy realized that he could no longer deny the truth he had been feeling for weeks. The woman's presence in their lives had become essential. Her kindness, patience, and strength had touched him deeply. He knew now that he wanted her to be more than a friend. He wanted her to be part of their family, part of their lives forever. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to lower in the sky, casting a golden glow over the town, the cowboy led his daughter to the edge of the fields just outside the town. The little girl ran ahead, her laughter filling the air, while he remained a few steps behind, gathering his courage. He had never done anything like this before, not asked for love, not spoken from the heart in such a vulnerable way. Yet he knew it was time. The woman followed behind, carrying a small basket of bread she had prepared for the evening. She looked at him curiously, sensing the seriousness in his movements and a quiet tension in the air. When they reached a small clearing, the cowboy stopped. The little girl ran to the woman holding out the basket.
"For you!" she exclaimed.
"We wanted to share some bread because we love you." The woman knelt down, accepting the gift with a warm smile. "Thank you, little one. That's very kind of you." She glanced up at the cowboy, her expression soft and expectant. He took a deep breath, his hands gripping the reins tightly. He felt his heart pounding in his chest, but he spoke clearly, his voice steady despite the nervousness. I came here thinking only of survival, thinking only of providing bread and safety for my daughter. But you've shown me something more. You've shown me kindness, patience, and love, things I didn't know I could have." The woman's eyes glistened, though she said nothing, waiting patiently for him to continue. "I don't want to just survive anymore," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I want a life where my daughter can laugh freely, where we can feel warmth and joy, where I can share my life with someone I trust, someone I care for deeply. And that someone is you." The little girl's eyes widened, and she took a small step back, sensing the gravity of the moment. The cowboy reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a simple leather cord tied around a small, smooth stone. "I don't have much to offer," he said, "but I can promise you this. I will always care for you, always protect you, and always be honest with you. Will you be part of our family? Will you marry me?" For a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. The woman's eyes softened, tears welling as she looked at the man who had come into her bakery weeks ago, seeking only bread, and now stood before her, offering his heart. "Yes," she whispered finally, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, I will." The little girl squealed in delight, running to hug them both. "We're a family!" she cried. The cowboy laughed, a deep, rich sound that had not been heard in years, and held both the woman and his daughter close. For the first time in his life he felt whole, truly whole, not just because of survival or safety, but because of love, trust, and connection. That evening, as the sun set and the sky turned shades of pink and purple, the three of them sat together in the small clearing, sharing bread and stories, laughing freely. The woman had baked special treats, and the little girl showed her drawings she had made to celebrate the moment. The cowboy watched them, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and wonder. He realized that life could be beautiful, even after years of hardship. He had come into town seeking only bread, only sustenance for the day, and had found something far greater: friendship, love, and family. The small acts of kindness that had started with a simple piece of bread had grown into a bond that would last a lifetime. As the stars began to appear in the night sky, the cowboy held his daughter close and looked at the woman beside him. He knew that whatever challenges the future might bring, they would face them together. They had found trust, courage, and love in each other, and that would carry them through anything. And so, under the soft glow of the moon and the sparkling stars above, a life that had once been lonely and uncertain transformed into one of warmth, hope, and endless possibilities. The cowboy had found not only a partner in life, but also a home for his heart, and for the heart of the little girl he loved more than anything in the world. For them, the simple act of kindness, the first piece of bread shared so long ago, had truly changed everything.